Hello, welcome to the session. We're hosted by Mike Jeffries from Birmingham Mind. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Mr. Matthews.
Thanks for joining us. I'd just like to really reach out to Birmingham Mind and say a big thank you for everything that you're offering to Lightwoods at the moment, and thank you for all the support you're offering to the parents. Lightwoods are proud of the collaboration, and we hope that all of the parents watching this video, guardians and carers, find this useful in whatever way you can. Thanks again, Mike.
And thank you, Mr. Matthews. A huge thank you for your support and for your collaboration with Birmingham Mind in terms of the session. We hope it will be really practical and helpfully useful to parents, but without your support, we wouldn't be able to do this. So it's hugely appreciated. Thank you for your time, Mr. Matthews. You can imagine it's hugely busy, so we'll let him escape and get away, and I'll press on with the session. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So I'll take up as little as your time as possible. Thank you again for anyone who clicks on the link to watch this session by telling you anything about me. So my name is Mike Jeffries. I'm the training manager for Birmingham Mind. I've worked for them, it'll be for 18 years this year. And I always say that one of my major motivations for doing this work is my own experiences around mental health, particularly around struggles with anxiety in particular. So I'm someone who accessed counselling at the start of the first lockdown in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way I see that is that, well, lots of people might need some extra physio for a bad back, or I don't know, maybe a knee problem I had for a long time. I just need extra physio for my head from time to time. And that helped me perform a lot better at work, and also just be better in my relationships and better with people around me, really, and just be a lot weller. So all of our sessions are always about encouraging people to seek help, that it's okay, that it's the right and professional thing to do if we happen to be struggling with our mental well-being. So I'm just going to bring up some slides for this presentation and talk us through those. There's also a short film clip that I'll show as well, and we can potentially send out the link to the film clip if you'd want to see that separately at some point. So I suppose the easiest thing to start with in terms of how do we stay mentally well in a global pandemic, to say a tiny bit about what Birmingham Mind does. We support something in the region 20,000 people per year at the moment, principally through our mental health helpline, which is 24 hours a day, in a partnership with the NHS in the Birmingham and Solihull area. We also have services that work directly with people in the community. I'm responsible for training sessions that we run for companies, businesses, schools, colleges, you name it, really, taking the mental health message into where people work, where people come together in communities, etc. We deliver things like mental health first aid, that type of thing. It's also really fittingly today that Thursday, 4th of February is Time to Talk Day, and the day that we're putting this particular session together. Clearly, you'll be watching it at whatever point you want to. The theme of that is the power of the small. And what does that mean? To break down that jargon, really means that tiny conversations about the smallest thing can be hugely helpful for people around their mental health. And particularly in terms of the pandemic, just the picking up the phone, doing a Zoom call, a WhatsApp call, or whatever it might be, keeping in connection with people is hugely beneficial for their mental health and well-being, and for you in terms of making that call. What do we know about the impact of the pandemic on people's mental health? I doubt anything on this slide will surprise anyone. It's from the Mental Health Foundation. They're doing a longitudinal study, so some research that's stretching through the length of the pandemic and beyond in terms of the impact on all of our mental well-being. But certainly, as it says on the slide, over half, 54% of the UK population saying they felt anxious or worried in the previous 2 weeks. And this research, or these findings, were at the end of December, just after Christmas 2020. It's had a huge impact on all of us to some degree or other. It's perfectly natural and normal to at points have struggled to feel stressed and anxious, because I certainly have no measure point with this in terms of my lifetime. It's been, we're probably all sick of words like unprecedented and huge, but it is, the pandemic is enormous in terms of its scope and its impact. So of course that will have an impact on our mental health, on our mental well-being. This is information taken from something called Every Mind Matters, which is an NHS resource. It's both an app and a website. Has some fantastic basic information around keeping mentally well. There's a little quiz you can do to check how your mental health's getting on. It's the kind of thing that will give you little messages to remind us to take exercise, drink water, etc. All the basic things of staying well. And as it says, taking care of our mind and body is just as important as each other in terms of the pandemic, in terms of our children, in terms of everything, our jobs and everything else that's going on in our lives. The difficult feelings, remembering that they can pass, but how we get through those sometimes requires support from other people. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign that we are professional people and that we want to function better and that we want to be well. There's nothing wrong in seeking that support, looking for that support. There'll be another plug for Every Mind Matters towards the end of this session as well. So what is this mental well-being thing? What's that all about? You might be wondering about the little green ribbon down in the corner of this slide. That relates to a campaign that's called This Is Me. It started in London, came to the West Midlands a number of years ago. The green ribbon is a sign of mental health awareness, that we're prepared to talk about mental health, prepared to have conversations about it. So you may have seen those around. Some of your workplaces may well have kind of adopted those around campaign weeks, etc., like Time to Talk Day that I mentioned a few moments ago. This is a definition from the World Health Organization of what mental well-being is. So defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their potential, cope with the normal stresses of life, because stress is a normal part of life. I think sometimes there's this idea that there are these magic people who never have any stress in life. Well, some stress is good. There's a level of stress required for me to record this, a level of stress certainly required for Mr. Matthews and his staff to perform to their best to keep themselves safe and all of us safe through the pandemic, etc., to keep educating our children. It's when stress gets out of control, of course, that it becomes an issue. So to be able to work productively and fruitfully, able to make our contribution, whether it's at times of the pandemic or not, all of this, our ability to contribute, our ability to work, to look after ourselves and our loved ones, hugely affected by our mental well-being. And this is where we talk about something called the stress container. I'll give you a secret here. If you put the two words stress and container into any search engine, you will find this. I'm really glad it's not copyrighted by anybody as far as I know. And this, I'm sure you'll find better graphics than the one I happen to have to hand as well. I suppose a really simple way to start talking about this, and I can just about illustrate this on the small boxes we find ourselves in on laptop screens these days. One of the kind of consequences of current circumstances, of course, is that this describes a situation that you sometimes people vocalize as, I've had it up to here, Mike, can't take any more, just something has to give. And maybe we get angry, maybe we get ratty with partners, etc., etc. We all have a personal internal ability to contain stress that's impacted by whether we get support from other people, of course, as well, impacted by lots of different things. And really what the diagram represents is it's comparing stress coming into our lives to fluid or water coming into some kind of container, which of course, if that container doesn't have a tap or a valve to release the pressure, to release the water, then it will keep filling and we'll get to the I can't take any more point and will overflow. And we're the same in terms of how stress impacts us, in terms of how stress feels. So it's really important that we all develop, get support to develop our taps and valves. For the 17 years I've been doing this work, one of the things I've always said is that, for instance, live music is one of my taps. Going to gigs, going to see bands, often bands that are really heavy. I like heavy metal, I like all kinds of kind of heavy music, etc. Clearly the pandemic has taken that away from me. Many of us are having experiences where the things that kept us well, sometimes the people that kept us well, are harder to access. We're not able to see in the way that we used to see them. So one of the encouragements is to develop additional taps and valves, additional ways of coping. In posh jargon, sometimes people call them well-being tools. It's the things that get you through the day, the things that keep you well. Exercise will be a big one for lots of people. A upside, in a sense, of the pandemic is that really just to stay well, I've had to focus more on my exercise. As it happens, I've managed to shift a couple of stone during the pandemic. Really, that's been about mental survival for me, is the truth of the matter, about maintaining function, being able to stay well. But it's about different things working for different people. And I think sometimes the exercise message comes across as, oh, you've got to run a marathon or climb a mountain. I'm not running marathons or mountains. I'm literally running a couple of hours a day in my house, quite frankly. It's about what fits, what works, particularly in the current circumstances for yourself. So the stress container is a really useful idea, something that certainly I come back to every 6 months or so, really, to check where it's at. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised by how empty it is. Sometimes it's, that's fuller than I thought it was. So it's a useful kind of way of thinking about it. What kind of people get stressed? All types of people. Younger parents than I will recognize more of these people, I'm sure. These are numbers of performance artists, musicians, particularly because I'm into music. Everyone's affected. Everyone has a stress container. We all have a mental health because we all have a mind. Therefore, we have a mental health. It's unfortunate the two words mental and health have always been seen as a negative traditionally. Mental health issue, mental health problem, rather than celebrating mental health because it's so vital. It's so vital for our physical health, so vital for us to stay well at all. And there can also be idea, I think, still quite kind of that's persisted through the ages, really, that yeah, but the people who get overwhelmed and stressed, even in difficult circumstances, are the people who aren't weak, who aren't strong enough. Well, actually, some incredibly strong, successful people have struggled with their stress container. It's maybe an easier example to give with elite sports people. But Dame Kelly Holmes, a number of years ago, very bravely at the time, because few people at her level were talking about this, described how when she had long-term injuries, so she was unable to train, let alone compete, let alone win medals at major championships, she turned to self-harm as a way of coping, as a way of getting through. Now, clearly, we don't want people to self-harm. It's not a helpful way. It's a harmful way of dealing with things, but it can be a coping mechanism for some people, and it's about understanding that. But the main message I'm trying to get across here, I hope, is clear that it's not about strength or lack of a personality. It's about the fact that everyone can be effective. We all have a mental well-being or need to protect that. We all have a stress container. All of our stress containers can be overwhelmed without support from other people, without those taps and valves, without those things that keep us well, our exercise, our music, our families, whatever it is that works for you, whether it's crafting, whether it's sports. Different things work for different people, but they're so essential for all parts of our health. Why have I brought up a really boring looking slide about health and safety executive management standards? I'll try to explain that they have a really good set of standards around managing stress at work, and they're these. There's 6 points, but I think they apply to all areas of life as well. The way that stress can be managed, the way it impacts on us. Sometimes it's about the demands. Lots of us have competing demands at the moment. Probably shows I'm currently working from home and homeschooling our child that's in reception at Lightwoods Primary. My partner works as well. Lots of us have these balances going on. Lots of people have worked throughout the pandemic and are still working in supermarkets and all kinds of things. Lots of people have the experience of furlough, of course, as well. And the pressures of homeschooling, of course, are very much in there. So the feeling of how much is in our control, trying to take control of the small things sometimes. The more we can take control of things, the less out of control, obviously, things feel. That will help us to avoid the stress container overflowing. Have we got support? Have we got someone to talk to, someone to vent to, someone to offload to, someone to go, down the phone at sometimes? It's about what works. And that requires good relationships. Of course it does. I think relationships need a lot of work currently, don't they? They always need work, but particularly at the moment. In terms of work, but also in terms of our roles in family life, are our roles cleared? Have they become blurred at the boundaries? That can be a stressful thing. And it hardly needs me to say about number 6, change. We've all gone through so much change in what's approaching a year now of the pandemic. So of course that has a huge impact on us and potentially on our children as well. So this is where I want to give you a little break from my voice. Hopefully we're trusting the tech should work. I'm going to play a short film. This is from Coventry and Warwickshire. IAPT in the jargon is increased access to psychological therapies. That's just talking therapies. That's just getting to speak to a counsellor, essentially. This is a really good film because it's specifically about the pandemic. It's also quite short, and at least it's fairly local to us in that it's a Midlands service. So what I need to do is I'll stop sharing my slides here. try not to talk over the boring bit where I'm bringing up at the film and clicking a number of buttons to make sure they work. Don't think I've achieved that. I think I managed to talk over it anyway. Again, if there are any kind of sound problems with the film, etc., that there shouldn't be, but we can send the link separately to this film, just a 5-minute length film. And like I say, it gives you a little break from my voice as well.
Hello, my name's Tom Parsons. I'm one of the therapists from the Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull IAPT service. We're an NHS team that provides psychological therapy for common mental health difficulties such as depression and anxiety. We've decided to put together some short videos to introduce principles and techniques to help us all manage during the coronavirus. When facing a situation that feels threatening and uncertain, such as the coronavirus, emotions like fear and anxiety are completely normal. We can also find ourselves caught up worrying about all sorts of things that may be either unlikely to happen, unpredictable, uncontrollable, or even unimportant. And although this too is completely normal, it's often unhelpful and can cause us to feel even more stressed and anxious. So in this video, we're going to look at a simple principle that might help us to decide upon the best way to focus our resources. There are 2 types of worry that we can experience. The first are practical worries. These are worries about problems that are in some way within our control, that we actively can do something about. The second are hypothetical worries. These tend to be focused on the future and are often worries about something that is either unlikely to happen, unpredictable, falls outside of our control, or simply isn't that important. When a worry pops into our mind, we can respond in one of 2 ways. We can either choose to invest our time and energy into it, to be proactive and take action in regards to the worry, or we can choose not to invest our time and energy, acknowledge it and let it go. Investing our time and energy in trying to resolve a worry that is hypothetical, for example, what if somebody I love gets the virus, leads to unproductive worry and rumination. The worry is about something that is unpredictable and outside of our control. Investing in this worry is likely to just make us feel worse with very little benefit. In this instance, choosing to acknowledge the worry, naming it as hypothetical, and then letting it go to refocus our attention back on something in the here and now is a much more helpful way to respond. This doesn't mean that the worry simply goes away. It may come back into our mind, and that's completely normal. But each time that it does, simply greet it, remind yourself that it's unhelpful, and then bring your attention back to the here and now. We're not fighting or pushing away all hypothetical worries. That would be impossible. We're simply choosing not to invest any more of our time and energy into them than is absolutely necessary. Choosing not to invest our time and energy into a practical worry, such as I don't have enough food in the house and can't get to the shops right now, might be easier in the short term, but in the long term the problem is likely to persist or even worsen. If our worry is about a practical problem, something within our control, then it is helpful to invest and take action. In this instance, it might be useful to sit down and spend time trying to resolve the problem by listing all the potential solutions and coming up with an action plan. If we try and resolve a practical problem but find there is absolutely nothing we can do to improve the situation, then it might be an indication that the problem is actually hypothetical after all, as it falls outside of our control. The first and most important step in all of this is to notice our worry and then name it as either hypothetical or practical. This can then guide us to the most helpful response. If worries keep coming up for you, then it might be helpful to make a list to remind yourself of the things that fall within and outside of your control. For example, things that we can control right now are following guidelines on social distancing and hand washing, shopping responsibly, staying in touch with friends and family, cooking healthy meals, sticking to a good routine, and keeping active while inside the house. Things that fall outside of our control are the actions of other people, the response of the government, the possibility that somebody we know becomes unwell, how long social distancing rules will apply, whether or not we get the illness and the severity of symptoms, and the stock that may or may not be in the shops. After you've made your list, spend a bit of time reviewing it and decide where your focus is best directed. I hope that you found this video helpful. Please feel free to share it with others if you think they might also benefit. If you would like more information on the IAPT service, please visit our website www.covwalkpt.nhs.uk/IAPT. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so I hope, as with the rest of the session, that there's some useful things in there, potentially at least. Okay. So bear with me while I get us back to our slides. There we go. The joy of pressing the wrong button and doing it while the session's recorded. But I'm sure lots of people will recognise this as being part of life at the moment. So I'm just going to draw some points from the film, really. It can sound like such a cliche, but connection to people is a huge thing in terms of our mental well-being. And obviously that's changed massively in the last getting on for a year or so. We've had less connection with people in the ways that we kind of standardly do. So much of our connection is currently over screens like this. It's how lots of us are currently engaging our children in education. Of course it is how we're seeing relatives, etc. So some basic kind of ideas around maybe planning to watch a TV show and talk about it with people afterwards. I'm sure people are doing lots of these things, and just for the fact that we've been doing them for a number of months now doesn't mean that they're wrong or that they don't work. We can maybe get a little bored with them sometimes or need to kind of switch it up and try and do different things. But that connection with people is so important, certainly for us, keeping in contact with family members via kind of the video apps and all of those kind of things has been hugely important to keep us connected, keep us well, keep us checking in with each other to make sure we're okay. A brief word on masks, absolutely vital, of course. I'm used to the fact that, and it's unfortunate that any parents that I've kind of been near in terms of dropping our son off at Lightwood School since he started in September, I'll have only seen you through a mask. And feel free to have a laugh. That's a picture of me on a particularly rainy day, having picked up my son from school, wearing a mask, wearing my raincoat there as well. We need to use them. It's obviously important and right that the school suggests that we wear them. Some people are exempt, of course they are, and having long-term mental health issues is an accepted exemption, but they can be seen as quite scary. People feel that it's a visual reminder of the virus, if you like, and it's important to bear that in mind in terms of people's well-being. It's such a cliched thing for me to say, isn't it, at any point really, but to cut ourselves some slack, to treat each people with respect, understand difference is so important in this period of time, to say the least. So important around our mental well-being. And like I say, if seeing me in the mask and on the corner of that slide's giving you a giggle, well, frankly, that's good for your mental well-being. So I'm more than happy to have given you that laugh, to say the least. Finding the humour we can in current circumstances is very, very good for our mental well-being, to say the least. With such changes in our lives, it's very easy to lose what routines we've had before. So our diet can hugely be effective. I'm finding that there are lots of people spending so much of, if they're working from home, so much of the time moving from one Zoom meeting or Teams meeting to another, forgetting to eat sometimes. So it's important we grab lunch breaks, try and eat as healthily as we can, as all the kind of restrictions enable us to do. Staying hydrated. I'm the sad type of person that frankly has to have my water bottle somewhere within grasp. Otherwise, I just forget to drink enough. So I need those kind of visual reminders to make sure I do it. Other people have better short-term memories than me, but drinking enough water, clearly good for our physical health, really important for our mental well-being. There's been a huge piece of work in the NHS for a number of years called There Is No Health Without Mental Health. Our mental health and our physical health are so closely entwined. What's good for our physical health in lots of ways can be good for our mental well-being as well. So the keeping active message, I think often people used to hear this message, oh no, I'm being browbeaten into going to the gym when I hate it. Well, clearly we haven't had access to the gym for large parts of the pandemic. If we are just pacing around our room, if we are just sometimes making sure that every hour or so we get up out of the chairs, if we're working from home, if we're on laptop screens a lot, then that will do something for us to stretch muscles, etc. And it gives you a break. I'm encountering lots of organizations, I'm trying to do it, where we make sure we give ourselves at least a few minutes break between one meeting and the next encounter. That's hard hard to do when you have a number of children, when you have lots of family responsibilities. It's about, again, cutting ourselves some slack. We're all doing the best with this we can, but small things can make a huge difference. Trying to avoid sitting as much. I'm probably doing too much of that, but I'm definitely, after recording this session, will be getting up and walking around for my physical and for my mental health. Exposing ourselves to as much sunlight, fresh air and nature as we can, particularly difficult through winter as it got colder. I'm hoping we're about to hit a period where it'll get a little warmer, but I've very purposely set up where we work from home to be that I can look out the front window and get as much daylight as possible. Really important for our well-being, getting the curtains open whenever we can. And that can be hard given the feelings around the pandemic and how isolated we can feel, but doesn't mean that it's any less important or worth doing. And maybe it's also about holding on to treasured photos of holidays, etc., of the great outdoors, things that make us feel better. Can sound so cliche, but small things can make a huge difference. As much natural light as possible is really important. It's also really important to take care with how much news we're taking in around the pandemic, around COVID-19. Important to be up to date, important to know what current restrictions are, what we should be doing for both our health and for other people's health, of course, particularly for our children's health, obviously. But we can take in too much of it sometimes. Frankly, I'm kind of working on the basis of it. I give it an hour a day. Give myself an hour to check up on what's happening. It's very easy to get lost down the wormhole of so many varied opinions sometimes as well. Using trusted sources of information, very, very important as well that we do that. Important to be up to date, important to be safe, but also important to be aware that too much of it can have an impact on our mental well-being as well. And the practicalities of, for those of us who are constantly, if our working lives and a lot of our family and education related lives are on these screens now, the idea of using a different space if we're not in a formal work meeting, just breaking it up a bit. It depends on Wi-Fi, etc. It depends on systems, what we've got available. We can only make the best of what we've got. Of course we can, but I try and use a different room if I'm having a less formal meeting. Just try and change the background. They may possibly just look like strange pieces of paper behind my head at the moment, but the time to talk kind of ribbons that we have behind me as well. Just anything that alters things around can be useful. It's important we keep looking for changes. I think sometimes people say, well, how can you tell someone's struggling with their mental well-being when I only see them over a laptop screen? Well, sometimes they can give it away in terms of their body language, in terms of things they say. It is possible sometimes to spot those changes in people. And lots of people dislike video calls. And like I say, are already spending too much time on these calls and too long in terms of the calls, maybe. I always offer people phone calls if they want them. Sometimes we're glad just to be off camera. I'll be glad to escape the camera once we've finished recording this session, to say the least. So maybe giving yourself and other people some options can be good for our mental well-being. And it can be tough to close the office door when the office door is actually at home. Trying to do things like, I have to stick to this, shutting the laptop, can't even speak today, shutting the laptop lid down at the end of my work time that I'm working. Occasionally I have to come back and check an email. That's life, isn't it? That's what we're all dealing with. But trying to give as much distance, particularly when work is home and home is work, some kind of boundaries. Sometimes I just literally get a kind of towel or something and cover the laptop up at the end of the day. And psychologically in my head, right, that's back to being a family room and we'll use it for something else. Work is done. We have to get those breaks in. We have to give ourselves the opportunity of some peace, some quiet, some rest where we can grab it. And I'm frankly glad to be not having to have to do the commute I used to have to do to work every day. It eats up several hours of our day, but actually I think on the flip side of that, whilst that's removed some stress from my life, it's also a real time where I used to kind of defrag and calm down from my day and maybe be less stressed when I got home to family as well. And we've lost that. It's about trying to adapt to new rhythms, different ways of working, which I'm sure lots of people have. But keep looking at that. The fact that whether it's over a phone call or not, just hearing somebody else's voice. I'm lucky. I deliver trainings often to tens of people, if not hundreds of people in a week. So I see lots of people, but lots of other people may be much more isolated than that. If it's a phone call, it can still make a huge difference to people's life. And the last part of the slide there, creating mental health headspace will give us the capacity to unwind. Desperately, desperately important in current circumstances in particular. And just briefly around the whole experience of homeschooling, which of course resources. I'm not an educator. Maybe I've got some advantages because I train people for a living, if you like, but the idea that we're doing all we can, our children are doing all they can. Mr. Matthews and his wonderful staff are doing all they can as well. Again, it's about cutting ourselves some slack, we're doing the best we can and accepting that, really. We can potentially send out these links as well to the Anna Freud Centre, but also to the Mentally Healthy Schools website, which has some fantastic resources around mental health and education and schools. And the diagram, it's not a diagram, the little illustration there on the slide that says brain breaks, just the idea of getting a little bit of break in between maybe the more intensive schoolwork, making sure there's lots of fun. We need fun too. The way life is at the moment can feel like it's taken a lot of the fun and laughter away. Fun and laughter are huge, important things for our mental well-being, also for our children's education as well. But again, I apologize if it does sound like a cliche, but we're doing what we can, and it's really important that we accept that and don't beat ourselves up too much for what we're not able to do at the moment. And likewise, talking about the pandemic with our children, there's been times when I've been worried about how often my son will talk about viruses, etc. It does need clear and honest information. We want to protect them, of course we do, in the same way we want to protect their physical health, but also some honesty and some preparedness maybe to share, when appropriate, some of our vulnerability when we're scared as well. Children see that adults are scared, children get worried. The clearer we can be with them, with honest, simply and clearly broken down information around the virus itself, around the pandemic, that's going to be good for all of our mental well-being. And again, this can sound like a cliche in itself, but there's immense research that backs up the idea of random acts of kindness being really good for your mental well-being and for the people receiving the act of kindness. I have a friend who, frankly, has always kind of thought themselves as being too strong and too immune from mental health issues. And they started to struggle during the pandemic, certainly during the first lockdown. That one of the things they adopted to try and help themselves and others was they started looking down the list of contacts in their mobile phone, and thinking, well, I haven't rung that person for years, maybe. I'm going to give them a call. I'm going to see how they're doing. And they found that hugely beneficial. They've had some great laughs. They've had some wonderful catching up. They've built greater connection with people. But they've had lots of people say, thank you. You're the only person who's rung me for several days and weeks. This call has meant a lot. And the fact that they've then advertised that on social media and encourage other people to pick it up as a habit is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We're approaching the anniversaries for lots of us of it being up to a year since we've done some things. It will be a year since I've been inside my office where I was based before the pandemic. Actually, it's going to be a year since I've used public transport very, very soon as well. That might hit people very hard. This might be the exact time to pick up the phone again, make the video call, remake connections with other people, both for your mental well-being and for theirs as well. And I mentioned briefly earlier, nurturing relationships, particularly important at the moment. I'm going to clear my throat there, apologies. Really important in that we're in the same spaces even more often than we used to be sometimes. We're trying to work, we're trying to educate in home spaces. We're going to have a wide variety of different experiences about how much space we've got, of course we are. So trying to give some concentration to our relationships is a really useful, practical thing to do as well. Thinking very practically about how we use the physical space, having honest conversations about what can work, who needs what at what time of the day. In our household at the moment, we're often juggling and moving rooms because I might need the Wi-Fi to deliver a session, but then my partner might need it because she manages a team of people in terms of what she does for a living. Lots of swapping around, but it takes lots of communication. I'm saying the word sorry a lot. I think that's a really important word in the human language to look after ourselves, look after our relationships. And clearly for someone who's experienced bereavement or loss during the pandemic, particularly if you've lost someone to COVID-19, that's a huge impact on people's mental well-being. The Birmingham Mind Helpline that I mentioned at the start of this session has some fast track support to get people into bereavement counselling. Really important that we accept that people are going to feel anxious, sad, angry, shocked, lots of different things if they've lost someone, but also a sense of loss in terms of maybe it can seem unimportant. And I think sometimes there can be almost a league table that's in our heads that says, I shouldn't be struggling, I shouldn't be stressed. Other people have lost partners that have died because they've contracted the virus. Why am I stressed just because I'm missing my my work colleagues. Well, it's still a loss. It's still a difference. It's still a change. And we might well need someone to talk to about that as well. So what are the kind of things we can look out for in terms of ourselves and in terms of others, even if we only have these small boxes on the video screens to be keeping in contact with people? The key message is to look for a change, looking for something that's different for Mike or Ranjit or whoever it might be, whoever the person is you're thinking of. So changes in behavior, attitude, appearance, etc. that are the things we're looking for. Some people will need a lot more reassurance than used to need pre-pandemic, and that might be a sign. It's not about constantly asking people if their mental well-being is struggling. I think sometimes people can understand where you react quite badly to that. I don't want people asking me every 5 minutes if I'm all right, but every once in a while, that can be hugely helpful. The word presenteeism can sound like a piece of jargon, so just a brief bit of explanation about that in terms of work, but it could mean relationships as well. It's when we're physically present, but we really aren't because our heads aren't there, or we're too tired or too unwell, either physically or mentally. It's when we struggle to give our best of ourselves. It's when we, certainly in terms of work or maybe educating our children, we're not at top performance level because we just can't be. It's about cutting ourselves some slack, seeking support, talking to people, not beating ourselves up for not being superheroes every hour of the day. Frankly, I think parents are being superheroes 24 hours and beyond sometimes, but it's impossible to do that all the time. We need to be thinking about our own mental well-being and others to keep all of those things going. How do we have conversations about mental health? It can be difficult, and very difficult if you've not done it before. Part of my work experience in the pandemic was I was part redeployed to our helpline for 4 months in 2020. I took lots of phone calls from people who said, I'm really embarrassed about making this call. I never thought I'd be the one to be struggling with my mental health. I'm the strong one in our family. I keep the rest of them going. And it really is about saying to people, you've done the right thing. What do you want to talk about? How can we help you? I think we can worry about saying the wrong things, saying that if you say the wrong set of words, you'll make things worse for people, make a person more stressed or more depressed, more anxious, etc. It's a huge sweeping thing for me to say, but most people, I include myself in this, who struggle with issues with their mental well-being from time to time, we just encourage the attempt. We don't expect you to be superhuman when you ask us. The fact that you do, that you show the human care and interest, that makes a huge difference. You don't have to have all the perfect words, but the fact that you try, that's much more important. It's the silence, it's the lack of an attempt to talk to someone who's struggling with their mental health. That's what hurts. That's what's much more difficult, really. But also awareness of how deep the stigma runs. As a 53-year-old, I think I struggled with my mental health, at least from my teenage years. It took me until my early 30s before I really sought some help. It's quite typical of us men, it has to be said. Sorry, fellow males, if that sounds like I'm generalizing too much there, but we do tend to be, statistically speaking, really bad at seeking help. It's not a wrong thing to do. It's not a weakness. It's the right thing to do for our health and for the health of the important people in our lives as well, that we do seek help, that we try and get support if we need it. It's about persistence, it's about honesty, it's about giving it a go. It's about not feeling that you necessarily have to be an expert. And clearly we need our employers, we need other people, other significant organisations in our lives to be taking that seriously. If you are in work currently, even if you're furloughed, potentially you might have access to a thing called EAP, an employee assistance program through work. They may have phone lines, there may be things you can talk to your manager about potentially. It's a huge step and can feel quite scary, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong step. It means it's the right thing to do for your mental health and for others. And clearly Lightwood School has children and parents that live in Sandwell area, as well as we happen to be over the border, just over the border in the Birmingham area. There's a Sandwell Helpline, the equivalent of the Birmingham Blind Helpline I mentioned. Again, a huge thank to Mr. Matthews for sharing in the school newsletter information and the number for this phone line. We can send that out again, but that has been in the school newsletter as well. So just to say that there is an equivalent 24-hour phone line in every part of the country essentially at the moment. Lots of more joint working between charities and the NHS and all kind of stakeholders in mental health at the moment to give people faster access to support, faster access to things like counselling, bereavement support, etc. That's the Birmingham Mind Helpline that I mentioned. Again, just to emphasize that all of these lines at the moment are 24/7. You will get somebody on the end of the phone at whatever point you ring during a day. And there's also the Young Minds Parent Helpline, which again, is wonderful. It's been shared in the school newsletter, a great national resource for parents, particularly parents that are worried about their children's mental well-being, but also their own. The two things are intertwined, of course they are. That helpline is open from 9:30 till 4, Monday to Friday. So unfortunately not a 24-hour service, but a vital service and a really important one that's useful to. Please feel free to share that with other parents, other people that you know as well. Mind Nationally, as a national charity, produce great resources about how to have a chat with your GP around your mental health. Of course, the practical thing at the moment is the chat may well be like this, over a video screen, over a phone call at the moment. But if you've never done it before, it can feel like a big step. So some top tips are maybe scribble some things down, some rough notes before you have the conversation. Can somebody be with you if you find it difficult to express what you're feeling or you've been through, or you just feel guilty about feeling the way you do when you think other people are worse off? We are who we are. If we need help, we need help. But if you need a little bit of advice, some tips around how to have that conversation with the GP, then there is information around that can support you with that. And I mentioned at the start of the session, the Every Mind Matters app and website. Like I say, we carry so much of our lives around on our digital devices, on our phones these days. This app is designed to have something good for your mental well-being, for your mental health to carry around with you. I mentioned a nice little quiz, and you'll see some of the celebrities there on screen on the slide that have been supporting this as well. So just as important as for our physical health, that we have a kind of good resources to protect our mental health. There's a whole suite of information on the Mind National website around coronavirus and mental health. And certainly if my email address was shared in the school's newsletter, happy for people to contact me there if you want to, and I can send some of this information, or you can find it. If you just search Mind Mental Health Charity, you will find these resources online through whichever search engine you use. And there are lots of other resources out there that we can signpost you to. Maybe I'll just mention one. Hub of Hope is another app. It's just literally hubofhope.co.uk in terms of the website. Very simple. You input a postcode, it will throw up all of the current support services, helplines, etc. in your area, designed to be simple and practical and to get people the help that they need in as timely a fashion as possible. So that's the end of me talking. That last slide there just gives you some more context for Birmingham Mind. I want to say a huge thank you again to Mr. Matthews and to his staff for the support and the link up with Birmingham Mind to do this session. I've hugely appreciated it. I think it's a good thing for my mental well-being to be able to do these sessions, and I just hope there's maybe some small thing in here that's helpful to other parents. It's a tough time, it's a difficult time. I wish there'd been an opportunity to get to know some of you a lot more than only seeing you wearing a mask when I've been taking my son to and from school while school was still open, etc. But we will get to meet on another occasion, I'm sure, at some point in the future. Maintaining our mental well-being and looking after ourselves in the meantime makes that all the more possible. So I'd just encourage you to consider seeking help if you need it, pass on information to other people. But like I say, huge thank you to Lightwood School and Mr. Matthews for the support in terms of doing this session. And a huge thank you to you for clicking on the link and giving it some time to have a look at this. And yes, I hope we get to meet soon and it isn't over a laptop screen. Thank you very much indeed.